Okay. So, welcome to the 10th week course, and in this week we have 5 sessions, and all these 5 sessions are devoted to intellectual capital management. Now, the first question that will come to your mind, that why we are going to discuss about intellectual capital management. You remember, we have been talking about various topics related to HRD in terms of its context, process, and we also discussed a number of HRD interventions like training and development activities. Then we talked about coaching, mentoring, counseling, right. If you look at these interventions which were planned at the individual level for the growth and development, so that you are going to create a competent and skilled workforce for the organization. Okay. So, this competent and skilled workforce is also a capital for the organization, which is known as human capital, right. So, if you want to assess the quality or the extent to which human capital is there in your organization, okay, you have to measure the or create a tool or index to see what is the level of human capital in your organization, right. So, intellectual capital basically not only covers human capital, that is sum of knowledge, skill and competencies which all individuals in an organization has. So, what we are discussing here is not at the micro level, but at the macro level we have to see that what is the intellectual capital base of an organization at the macro level, at the organizational level, right. Because intellectual capital cannot be measured at the individual level. At the individual level, what you are going to measure is his level of competencies that he has in terms of his skill and knowledge base, which is going to be related to good performance. Now, if you want to see that an organization perform well, so then you have to see that whether we can relate it with the intellectual capital base. The question that I am trying to answer here is that is it possible to say that if intellectual capital base of an organization is higher, then the organizational performance is going to be good. So, you want to see a positive correlation between intellectual capital of an organization and the performance of the organization in terms of productivity, performance, reputation, brand image, whatever you say or take as a measure of organizational effectiveness. So, we are trying to directly relate organizational effectiveness and performance with the quality of its intellectual capital, right. And that is where we need to measure it at the macro level, at the organizational level, that what is the base of the intellectual capital. Okay. And that is how we are trying to create certain models and measures to see what is the index of intellectual capital for an organization, and if this index is gradually increasing or improving over a period of time or not. So, you will find that if the intellectual capital index of an organization is improving further, it means that the quality of proficiency of their people, some quality of their proficiency of their people, if you are going to sum it up together, it is much higher. Okay. And that is why it is important for organizations today that on the one side you are going to show it on your balance sheet. Okay. As a part of your balance sheet, you are going to show certain assets and liabilities, right. Now, under the heading assets, can we also show this kind of asset, because they are also part of the asset. So, can intellectual capital be reflected on the asset sides of a balance sheet or not? Why should we go for these kind of things? So, probably in this chapter we are going to discuss all such issues which is related to what we call intellectual capital management. So, we start our discussion by discussing the first point, and there is a statement which says that intellectual capital has been in existence for as long as companies have had consumers, right. What does it mean? It means you have an intellectual capital in the organization since its beginning, otherwise how are you going to start a company, or otherwise how a company is going to exist without intellectual capital, right. Because it is the intellectual capital who is going to decide about a company. Okay. Similarly, it is an asset. Okay. Intellectual capital is an asset, okay. And most cases Earlier it was known as goodwill, but we are not using accounting goodwill, okay, because unless we are going to use certain accounting measures to measure this goodwill, you will not be able to measure intellectual capital in a proper way, right. Now, if you look at the definition that is provided for intellectual capital, it says that all non-monetary and non-physical resources, which is either partly or fully controlled by the organizations and contribute to the organizational value creation. See, this value creation is basically nothing else, but the quality of intellectual capital that an organization has, and that is why you report intellectual capital as a part of a balance sheet. You also create a index of your intellectual capital, and on a time period you see whether it is progressing or not, whether there is an increase in the intellectual capital index or not. So, all this issue is to be discussed gradually one by one, and that is why we have taken up this topic as a part of HRD. Now, the first question comes up that comes up to our mind is that why we are going to talk about intellectual capital as such. It is because of the changes that is happening. Okay. In the new economy, the kind of challenges that is created by the economy relate to technology, and you know that new businesses model are coming up, okay, and they are trying to leverage different resources, okay, and they are trying to see that how we can use different resources more effectively, and because you are going to work in an environment which is very turbulent, which has created challenge for the management, okay, and that is why you need to identify that what is the quality of your the competence level of your professionals, right. It is not only the quality and the competence of your professional levels, but you also include all assets that an organization has. So, human capital is one such asset which is very important, but in addition to human capital you might be having other assets. So, you also need to include other assets that we will discuss later as a part of your intellectual capital. So, intellectual capital does not mean only human capital, okay. It includes other capital as well, right. And it is very important to address issues related to changes that is happening in the environment, so that you are able to create better wealth for your shareholders, okay, because you are responsible for managing shareholders wealth, because you have to see that how effectively you are going to manage various assets, how you are going to do it, what are the conditions under which you are going to take it up, okay. And then you have to see that what is the future value or the market value of your equity. What I mean to say here is that, see, in financial terms you have to see that how market is going to value your organization or your people or your assets that you have created. So, when you are going to talk about intellectual capital, probably intellectual capital is going to provide you an answer of all these questions that may come up, that in what way can use better resources, how we are going to manage our assets, how we are going to quantify assets in monetary terms, okay, what are the various assets that an organization has, and what needs to be done to these assets to create value for the organization, okay, so that the market value of the organization improves, right. So, with this definition, we are going to talk about the concept of human capital or sorry intellectual capital. If you look at this, it was actually proposed by Senior in 1836. Okay. He used this term in 1836 and he coined this term that is known as intellectual capital. If you look at the literature, you will find a number of definitions of intellectual capital, which has come from different disciplines like sociology, psychology, management, economics. Okay. So, there have been a number of disciplines which have contributed, you can say, to this definition of intellectual capital. Okay. So, it has this term has evolved from different academic disciplines. Okay. Now, here I am taking one or two major definitions which you can look at it, like intellectual capital is defined as the economic value of structural capital and human capital and relational capital of a company. It means intellectual capital does not only confine to human capital, right. It also includes structural capital and relational capital, right. The other definitions which say it is only human capital as structural capital, but here structural capital also include other capitals and human capital also includes relational capital, right. There is a definition that is given by Edmondson and he is trying to see that how we can calculate intellectual capital index of an organization, and he says that it is nothing else that is that is the difference between book value and the market value of a company. So, book value is what? That is the balance sheet of your organization, right. That is assets minus liabilities, and that is how you create book value for an organization. But when it comes to market value, you are going to use a different formula, that what is the current stock price, but number of outstanding shares. So, that is the market capitalization. So, what is the difference between your book value and market value, and that is how you are going to identify intellectual capital index of the organization, okay. Right. So, with this conception of intellectual capital, we move further and try to define what are the main components of intellectual capital, right. Now, if you look at this, it includes 4 different kind of capital. Social capital was added at later stage. So, the first major and more important or what you call relevant capital is known as human capital. Next is organizational capital or structural capital. We will discuss what this capital means one by one, and then we have customer or relationship capital, and finally, we have social capital, right. So, what we are going to discuss now is the different forms of capital one by one. So, look at the first type of capital, that is known as human capital. What is human capital? It includes some of knowledge and skill base of all individuals, right, which may include his education, his skill, his competence, how he performs his jobs, his experience, his judgment, right, his motivation attitude. Okay. It means basically the talent of the people. So, the talent of the people is known as human capital, right. Now, if you look at the talent of the people or human capital, here are some examples of possible indicators that I have taken. Okay. How satisfied they are, how they are going to be evaluated so far as competencies are concerned, what is the average of professional, what is the average of qualification, what is the level of turnover, what is the percentage of personnel who possesses new ideas, how much value added by the personnel costs. So, all these some of the indicators of the human capital, which basically reflects to their knowledge, skill, judgment, what are the things that they do, what is their skill base, qualification, experience, judgment, everything. It is a part of what you call human capital, right. So, moving from human capital, we try to define the other form of capital, which is a component of intellectual capital. So, the second one is organizational or structural capital. Now, if you look at organizational or structural capital, you have to see that what is organizational capital. Okay. Organizational capital includes a lot of assets, which is a part of the infrastructure, like what is the reporting relationship, systems, processes, structure, methodologies, routines, knowledge base of the organization, technology, communication infrastructure, right. How businesses operates, what is the reward system, what is the management system, what is their culture, corporate values, everything is a part of the organizational capital. Similarly, the intellectual property that is created by the organization, like the patents, copyrights, design rights, trademarks and trade secrets, all of them are going to be part of what you call the organizational capital. Okay. So, the idea is the processes which is going to provide competitiveness to the organization. So, based on this capital, the organization is going to achieve competitive advantage over their competitors, because our competitors may not be following the same set of knowledge base, the same set of technology, our systems, culture, our processes which are important for the organization, because these capital facilitate better performance through which the organization is going to compete with their counterparts, right. So, this is what we know as organizational or structural capital. If you look at some of the indicators, that what is your investments in R&D activities, how many new products you have, what is the number of computers as a part of infrastructure, how much investments you make in information technology or sales, what is the percent of sales that you have interested in intangible assets, okay, how many patents you have. So, these are some of the possible indicators, it is not an exhaustive list, okay, but that will give you an idea, okay, these are a part of your structural capital, either in the form of infrastructure or in terms of say structure, system, process or culture, or in terms of patents. So, all this forms your structural capital, right. Now, moving to the third one, that is known as customer or relationship capital. Okay. So, if you look at the customer or relationship capital, it depends upon your interaction and relationship with the customers, right. So, you have to say that how many customers you have, what kind of distribution channel you have, what is your licensing agreements with say companies, okay? What is your brand image, loyalty, how satisfied your customers are, what is your market share, whether what kind of alliances you have with customers, whether you have formed strategic partnership with your vendors, suppliers and others. Okay. So, it includes also what kind of goodwill you have, what kind of recognition you have in the market, what is the brand value of your organization, right. So, this basically the value chain and the stakeholder or customer relationship is very, very important, okay, because it is changing very fast. So, this is a part of what you call customer or relationship capital. Look at some of the possible indicators of this. Like what is the customer satisfaction index, how many new customers you have added, how many customers complaints are there, okay? How many new suppliers you have added, what is your number of suppliers, what is the percent of sales to loyal customers, right. So, if you look at in the figure, it shows the kind of relationship that you need to develop, right. Then your brand awareness. Okay. So, all this is a part of what you call relational capital, right. Moving from relational capital, the next thing that we are going to discuss, which was added at later stage, is social capital. Though social capital initially was not a part of the or a component of what you call intellectual capital, but later on it was added as a part of intellectual capital, which is known as social capital. So, social capital is equally important, because it contributes in effective performance of the individual. The human capital is okay, but if you do not have social capital, probably human capital will not facilitate growth and development fully, and that is why social capital was added. It includes the kind of norms and values you have, what kind of social relationship you had at the workplace, whether people cooperate, what kind of networks or relationships that you have developed, whether the trust or whether the relationship is based on trust and respect or not. Okay. So, basically you are going to create a value based on human relationship. So, the asset value of human relationship is very important, because this human relationship is something that helps you to contribute better. Okay. So, you are going to not only leverage the individual talent and ability, but also look at the relationship, okay, because this relationship is going to help you to exceed, okay, if it is provided it is combined with talent and ability of the people, right. And that is why it is known as human relationship is also an asset for the organization, okay, and this is what we know as social capital. Okay. So, what we have discussed so far is 4 different kind of capital, that is starting with human capital, infrastructural capital, or what you call structural capital. Then we talked about relationship capital, and finally, basically customer relationship capital, and finally, social capital, and all these capital formed together are known as intellectual capital, right. So, that is what we call intellectual capital. This is one example, okay, component of intellectual capital. See, why I have given this example, this is taken from the web actually. So, if you look at the news, it says that IBM buys Lotus to get notes, allow company to keep name and operate independently. What does it mean? This reflects that how much money IBM has paid to buy Lotus. Okay. Now, if you look at the book value of Lotus, that was 14 times less than the market value of Lotus. So, when IBM wanted to buy, it looked into the intellectual capital, that is the market value of the company. It did not look into the financial value, that book value, which is basically nothing else. They did not look at the assets and liabilities which the Lotus as a company had, but they tried to buy it at a much higher price, right. The idea was that they were looking at the market value, not the book value, but at the same time you will also find that they try to keep the name and operate, let this company operate independently under the umbrella of IBM. Now, Lotus is a part of IBM. So, what I meant to say is that company was not influenced by book value to buy it, but by the market value. Okay. And this market value comes from what? The intellectual capital. It means they try to look into the human capital, the knowledge and skill base of the people, look into the structure of it, structural capital, look into the customer relationship and the social capital, and they found that it is much higher than the financial values, and that is why company went on to buy this company, right. IBM purchased Lotus because of market value, not the forecast value. And this example actually is given to explain that if market value is higher, we should go for it. You should not look at the book value of the company. So, the book value is not that important compared to market value. Now, I will discuss about some of the current practices which is followed. So, there was a survey in 2001 which was conducted in 368 companies by a consulting firm that is known as Arthur Andersen, and they said that most of the companies today are reporting intellectual capital as a part of their financial balance sheets. Okay. So, now they are not only looking at the financial metrics, but they are also looking at non financial metrics. Okay. At least 50% of companies believe that if they are going to measure the intellectual capital, it is going to provide them a much richer information compared to other kind of things, right. But the only problem that most of the companies have, that since they are not going to follow the standard accounting process, it cannot be a part of what you call the balance sheet, financial balance sheet of the organization. Now, you will find that the trend has changed, and many companies include some of the parts of intellectual capital as a part of the asset. So, and some of them are doing it voluntarily. You will find that many Indian companies have adopted this practice. I will talk about that at a later stage, that the level of intellectual capital reporting by the Indian companies. But most of these companies are doing it on a voluntary basis, not on a, I mean this is not mandatory for them to show it on their balance sheet, okay, because balance sheet is basically book value. Okay. So, we have to see that this intellectual capital are being measured by most of the companies internally to satisfy them and to know what is their level of intellectual capital index, right. So, that they can realize their potential in terms of capital and can make use significantly for the growth and development of the organization, right. So, this survey shows that yes, gradually we are moving toward this, and now the companies are supposed to manage their intellectual capital, right. And now, if you look at this, it shows 4 different kind of capital: human capital, which basically is shown. If you see that it is basically contributing to intellectual capital and creating intellectual assets actually. So, this structural capital and human capital combined together, leading to creating certain intellectual assets in terms of documents, drawings, programs, data, systems, processes, and these kind of things, which is a part of the intellectual asset of the organization. And similarly, if you look at the structural capital both, so patents, copyrights, trademarks, trade secrets, designs, all kind of things are being created, right, which is related. And now, if you look at this, this is going to create business assets for the organization, like manufacturing facilities, creating distribution networks, having inventories of the customers and suppliers networks, okay, and developing organizational capabilities. Okay. And that helps you to commercialize your products, okay, because if you have created intellectual property, that is going to help you to go for better commercialization, so that you can create market value for yourself, right. And that is how firms are managing intellectual capital in a big way. What I am trying to tell you when I am talking about intellectual capital as such, that you need to understand the implications of understanding or conceptualizing intellectual capital as a term. See, in the beginning, as I told you, that this is a macro level measure, not at the individual level. You are not going to measure intellectual capital at the individual level, but it is to measure at the organization level. So, the effort that organization has to measure, to measure, that they have to find out what is the level of their different form of capital, whether it is human capital, structural capital, or relationship capital, or social capital, and in what way it is going to contribute to the business of the organization, so that organization is able to grow and develop. For example, you are going to use these assets to create something that is going to add value to the business, right. This is going to help you to create manufacturing facilities, distribution networks, so that you suppose your supply chain network is different. So, you can go for restructuring it. It is also going to ensure that your customer is maintained in terms of its loyalty, relationship, commitment, and these kind of things. The similar thing can be said about the suppliers and vendors also. And it also helps to create and develop the capabilities of the organization, that is very important. Now, if you look at this relationship, which shows that how you are going to make use of intellectual capital to create or add value for the business, right. For example, if you have create copyrights, trademarks, and then you can make use, can go for a commercial use of this. With this business assets and intellectual property, you can go for more business. For example, you can go for licensing of your trade and say trademarks, copyrights. Okay. You can use your patents to create products and services, right. You can go for better designing of the products and services. At the same time, you have developed certain trade secrets, which is going to help you to achieve competitive advantage. You know that if you look at some of the big companies, they never say divulge their trade secrets, because that is a part of the intellectual property. So, this intellectual capital intellectual property, which is a part of intellectual capital, is very important for the organization, because that is created as a part of intellectual capital exercise that is being carried out by the organization, which not only helps the organization to develop and grow, but also help you to achieve competitive advantage in the long run. Thank you very much.